Hi, everyone. I'm Santino Mancuso. I have a very special guest I'm going to interview, Garry Phillipson. He's probably best known as the author of the book Astrology in the Year Zero. The year zero was the year 2000, I think, Garry, when it was first published. And there's a new edition about to be released very, very soon. I'm making this video in late November 2025, so this is an appropriate time. But Garry is special to me because he has faced the dragon of what the heck is astrology? If you're not very deep into astrology or you're even an intermediate student, you might think, well, some people believe in it, some people don't. But whoa, it's crazy. Some people don't believe in it, think it's pseudoscience. Some people think, well, it's not a science yet, but it will be someday. And then there's this idea that it doesn't even really work in an objective empirical sense, but it works in action. This is a little more subtle, finely nuanced idea as divination. Um, Jeffrey Cornelius, other people are famous for developing this. Well, Garry, among all the people I know in the field of astrology, has headed right into the heart of this, interviewed astrologers, trying to understand A, what astrology is, who's right, and B, what are the different points of view. So being open, receptive, investigating, he's got tremendous experience in understanding this. So there's seven topics I want to address to make sure we're get some concrete stuff in a short interview. And I have my answers up here, but I'm really interested in Garry's answers or Garry, anything you want to say about the lay of the land and what's going on or your personal views. So what the heck is astrologer? Oh, master, tell me what astrology is.
Uh, okay, I think um, as soon as we start looking for astrology to fit into one box or one category, we're in trouble because it straddles different approaches. Um, I think one key thing with astrology, so far as I'm concerned, is that it involves engagement and commitment on the part of the person doing the astrology, and where there is a client, the client as well. Um, so, in a to up to a point, belief in astrology can be a self-fulfilling prophecy, not in the negative sense that the critics would understand that to be, but because we're not ultimately separate from the cosmos. Astrology, I believe, tells us that we are in some way uh, interrelated with the cosmos. Our attitude is an important factor in whether astrology works for us or not.
Wow. So let me summarize because you said some profound things there. We kind of assume in when we get into this scientific modality, like there's an objective reality and our eyes see some of it and our ears hear of it. But actually, that assumption that I think we almost intuitively take for granted, and some of quantum physics and stuff supports this idea that instead of thinking of an objective reality that we witness, we're engaged in reality. We're part of it. It's a it's a whole system. And astrology, I think what you're saying is seeing reality in that way. So it's not even a question of does it objectively exist outside of me? It's an experience. And within that under frame of reference, it's useful and makes sense. Did I say that correctly? Or
Yeah, yeah, that's nothing I can object to there. Yeah.
okay. Okay, excellent. So I want to get real hardcore here. So are you saying that that you don't think it's happening, or maybe it's another form of astrology? let's say you do a computerized something or other, or even better, statistical analysis where you say, do singers have Venus and Taurus or something, whatever? Or do they eat a lot of chocolate cake? Or I don't know, whatever astrologers say, or Aries are more often inventors or pioneers. Do you think that astrology can be confirmed in that way, or does it always need the involvement of the astrologer?
Okay, great question, I must say. And I should add, and this is perhaps now the time, that I wouldn't want to set myself up as having kind of nailed down once and for all what astrology is. I'm still in quest of the answers myself. Um, but science, in the sense that Jeffrey Dean and the critics that we know of would expect, I think there is um, some latitude there where you can get statistics that support astrology. Um, I mean, the Goklan work is an obvious case, but there I have a question whether one ever nails astrology down for all time. And what's specifically in my mind there is that the the Goklan effect, the Mars effect, primarily, tends to peter out in the 1950s. I believe that's been accepted by most of the researchers who've come after Goklan, and that was certainly Goklan's finding. So I have a question whether Goklan's desire to find some sort of effect created an effect, um, and the universe, in some way, which only makes sense if one accepts the premise that we are interrelated, integrated parts of this universe, showed Goklan what he was looking for, but it also ultimately showed him that it stopped, the effect stopped working when he started looking in the around the
Right,
1950s.
right. So you're still on the quest. You've been on this quest more than anybody else I've known to figure out what astrology is using these different things. And it's not easily answered. So you're seeing um, that the trail is still before us, I guess. But I think also the simplistic ideas when people say, "Oh, astrology is pseudoscience," or "astrology works. I've been doing it for 30 years," da, 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 and there's limitations to science. Those kind of extreme responses are missing what's really going on and the complexity of what's going on. And you might say the respect we need to give to different people on both sides of this in terms of their investigations. Is that a reasonable synopsis of?
Yes, yes, and I'd add that my current understanding is that different approaches seem to work for different people, and in order to engage with astrology in the best way, one needs to um, be on the qui vive for ways in which it might be possible to deepen or change one's approach based on what um, one's ongoing readings show. You know, there's an effect where when an astrologer sets out, they can get successful readings from quite simplistic things. And generally, as one goes on, one needs to delve more deeply into technique. But I think we're all different beings, and we all have different mental my, mental aptitudes and orientations, and some people um, will find a more scientific approach to astrology more congenial. Um, Other people, like say Robert Hand, Robert Zoller, will feel more at home with sort of ancient astrological techniques.
Right. So there are many doorways into this massive world of astrology, and you sounds like you're supportive of people engaging in whatever way they want to climb this mountain. You know, if they want to delve into the ancient traditions, if they want to try statistics, I'm getting this positive feeling like, go for it. We don't know yet where all these paths are leading. So, rather than often we hear this divisiveness, like I'm right, you're wrong, and you're kind of saying, um, maybe there's a little hubris there, like let's just figure this out. And if you're getting a lot out of studying ancient stuff and sorting that out, in the end, it'll help contribute. It'll either find something or not find something. Does that sound about right about your approach?
Yes, yes, it does. And I build the case for this kind of direction in around 100,000 words in my PhD thesis, where I kind of discuss it specifically in terms of the pragmatic philosophy of William James. So, there's
Yeah.
an element there of what is true is what works,
Yeah.
and what works can change from person to person.
Right, right. I'm laughing because sometimes, we think of truth as this like thing in a bubble that travels around, but it's a matter of what's happening in life. And in real life, we do what works. I mean, if the car works, we drive a car, if the airplane, so it's kind of where the rubber meets the road. Okay. Last thing I want to talk about, and then you can add on, of course, whatever you want to. And this gets really, I think, controversial. And so I always joke around that people want to throw rotten tomatoes. Well, that's a good thing about a virtual world. It'll just hit your screen. But to get like down and dirty about this, my view falls between the cracks, I think, of a lot of views of astrology. Because what I found is I have not been able to confirm a lot of the basic ideas in astrology. I redid the Gauquelin research, reanalyzed it, and I don't think he found anything.
Mhm.
It's extremely poor. Like this is not impressive. It's a start. The collecting of data and what he did with, he didn't have computers to generate whatever. I mean, the work he did was phenomenal, and the building, the groundwork, phenomenal. So I am indebted to him. But did he also make that additional step to validate anything? My analysis is no. So, um, but here's the controversial part. I've had a lot of difficulty confirming most ideas in astrology, but then I developed this complex pattern analysis, which is like way, way more involved than what John Addy or, it uses midpoints in different ways and stuff. The concepts behind the pattern analysis are simple. It's kind of like playing music in the Western scale. You got 12 notes and they repeat in octaves. What's your problem? Well, go play Chopin now. It's like the concepts are simple, but the implementation gets complicated. And so I found, and I wrote the book on bipolar disorder and made 800 videos on this. So the information is available that we are getting very high confidence levels. So I think that in the last 10 years, just fairly recently, 15 at most, the whole landscape of astrology is now revolutionized through a very just a more sophisticated analysis. We have the tools now to do this pattern recognition. And the principles are actually very simple. Um, so instead of looking at signs, houses, rulerships, you just look at the vibrations. People with bipolar disorder have Uranus and 11 vibration or multiples of that, etc. What do you think about my world I live in? And one of the things I'm going to mention is in 2026 in April, we have the Cosmic Discovery Conference. I'm so excited about it because I think we're at the beginning of a revolution. Like evidence-based, like I don't like, do you want to call psychology a science or not? It's debatable. I don't think medicine is a science. I think they're evidence-based practices. And I think astrology is at the very beginning of a revolution of becoming an evidence-based practice like psychology and medicine. We've got the data. So what do you think of my view?
Um, and your view is, would it be accurate to say that your approach is building on harmonics with John Addy and David Hamblin and midpoints as well?
Yeah, and it builds on some, it builds on ideas, from Dane Ridger on in terms of understanding how we do it, and it builds a lot on ideas in physics. So, for example, um, in the system I use everything as a force. So Venus is a force of attraction to beauty. It's not like a correlation. It's um, it's a mathematical modeling of these forces. So there's a lot of fundamental uh, underlying concepts that are very different from what John Addy proposed. But in terms of the analysis, yeah, you're right. It's harmonics and cosmobiology on steroids, but it's like high charge steroids. It no longer like looks the same. But yes, that's a
Mhm.
long answer. Sorry, but I guess the answer is yes.
Okay. I mean, I guess the next question, which you've no doubt been addressing for your own purposes, is how do you test and prove it? Um, I mean, so, for example, in my book Year Zero, I have an appendix with some uh, inquiries into time twins, who are in some cases the children of astrologers. So, the astrologers have been able to observe their children growing up and see similarities, but also see a lot of differences. So, one way to test it that strikes me is that you could perhaps get the charts for these pairs of twins and see whether your methodology uh, can distinguish between them and portray the differences in their characters and lives that the parents have reported on. Would it work in that way, do you think?
Yeah, that would be an excellent research design. It's more labor intensive than is realistic for me to undertake because not only do you have to get the time twin data, but then you have to decide the rules for distinguishing what the outcomes will be. And in the system I use, vibrational astrology, there's more we do not know than we do know. So, I'm not sure that I could take two time twins and distinguish them because the system, for example, the highest confidence we have is we can look at the chart, birth chart of someone and give a score for how prone they are to bipolar disorder. This is the one we've done the most research on. And that score will be statistically significant. It was statistically significant when we replicated with new data. And the effect size is enough to be moderately useful. Um, the statistical level is extremely high and is actually at a useful level, which, for example, the Gauquelin, even if it worked, was not enough to see who would be, should your child, go into sports or something. So, yeah, that's a design that would be nice. Mostly what we've done, what I've done and colleagues is number one, spend a lot of time building the model. So we look at data to see what's in the charts if people have anorexia, bulimia, etc. We've studied famous rock and roll musicians, and we remove selection bias. That's essential. So we don't use data we run into from some kind of database. And then we build a model with some of the data. And because our a priori assumptions of what's in the data are always wrong, even if we have the basic idea, like even if I say, oh, I bet anorexia has something to do with this, it does, but not in the way that I visualized it. So we have to refine the model and we collect new data and we test it. And if it works with the new data, then we have some confidence it works. That's the basic procedure, but it's not that the system in general can just like distinguish time twins or whatever. Maybe it can, maybe it cannot, but the research design would be extremely complicated.
Hmm. Okay. Um, Actually, just to round off the Gokalan point, which you began by asking about, the Michel Gokalin reckoned that his work primarily disproved astrology. Um, and he just referred to there being a gold nugget of effects that he'd found that he viewed as being the basis for a future neo astrology. So he by no means felt that he had vindicated astrology, quite the opposite.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so anyway, going on from what you just said, this reminds me a bit of Mark McDonough, who I imagine you would know of,
Yeah.
um, who, when I interviewed him, talked about doing a massive uh, data search and finding patterns, but finding that the patterns were nothing like they should be according to traditional astrology. Um, so what I'm wondering now is this approach you've developed as it stands at the moment. Um, is it something you would use to do a chart for somebody in the normal way, or is it primarily a way of proving astrology by getting to a significant level of statistics?
Well, that's an excellent question. The answer is it's used for both. It's used in real life situations. I've taught 2-year programs to probably 100 students. And it's here's a chart, interpret it. Here's a prediction. Here's a compatibility. Here's a relocation. So it's used in practice. The system I developed originated in the 1970s um, when I interviewed people. It started with interviews,
Mm,
hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of interviews. I was living in abject poverty, but wealth of mind, and I had and time, and I had lots of time. And I was first attracted to Vedic astrology and blah blah blah. And I tried different things, and so it started with interviewing people just to see what seemed to work. And in later on, I did data mining, what we call random forests and SVMs and different things, similar to what Mark McDonough did to try to extract out, but it didn't get anywhere. And it wasn't until, I mean, you always get significance because it's what we call Bonferroni correction, right? Are those things real or not? It wasn't until I stayed with the theory, the theory I developed through those interviews. If I said, okay, well, this is supposed to mean this, rather than be too open-ended based on those principles, then I started seeing things. So I've been at it for this past September, it was 50 years. And only in the last 10 years do I feel like I've really made progress.
Mm. Wow.
Yeah.
And this is a bit of a stab in the dark, but my guess would be that you've found that there aren't very many um, scientifically literate astrologers in the community who are able and willing to test the kind of approach you're putting forward. Would that be
Yeah,
true?
I'm laughing because it's so true. Sometimes when
Mm,
something's so true, I don't know, you just laugh. Um, yeah, so what I'm doing falls between the cracks. One thing that's been very surprising to me, and I didn't expect it, is I'm getting a little bit better response from the academic community, especially from physicists is my number one. Psychologists, not too much, but mostly people in the hard sciences are I'm getting more luck with them than with astrologers. Now, I know thousands of astrologers. I only know a small group of academic physicists and stuff. But percentage-wise, it's surprising to me. I talk to them and they say, "Oh, well, I don't think so, but it could be." Well, that's
mm,
good enough. I mean, okay. With astrologers, it doesn't seem to be much interest in confirming and critically assessing. I'll give you an example. I do a lot of research design, some which are a lot of, they're qualitative. They only give us a slight bit of confidence. And that's the thing in evidence-based practice. A little bit of confidence is better than no confidence. So I did research on zodiac signs to see what's feasible. That was like 10 years ago. Does anybody watch those videos or care about them? I mean, I had maybe 1,000 views, but some popular astrologers could tell you what they had for breakfast and get 100,000 views. So it's, yeah, but we do have a very small, motivated group, and that's why we have this institute, and we will have a conference, and hopefully we don't lose our shirts, as the saying goes, and people come, but we're taking a risk that there are people interested in confirming their ideas.
yeah.
It's risky.
Um, I tell you one thing that occurs to me. This might seem like a bit of a non sequitur to begin with, but I don't think it is. In Theravada Buddhism, you find a list of 89 classes of consciousness. And some meditators find it useful in cultivating mindfulness, to use this list and sort of analyze their experience in terms of, this is such a, consciousness type 27, this is consciousness type 34, succeeding it, and so forth. Whereas other meditators, and I'd count myself amongst them, find that just the basic distinction into mind and body is more than enough to be going on with. Um,
Yeah.
so my question arising from that is it possible, do you think, that uh, this extremely complicated approach um, has developed out of your specific aptitudes and is suited to you and a small group of other people, but wouldn't necessarily work as well for um, the uh, the astrologer on the Clapham omnibus, as we would say in Britain?
Wow, that's a brilliant thought and question. Here's my view. My view is it's a lot like psychology, and surprisingly, for some people, even medicine, where um, I used to have a lot of friends who were medical doctors, and um, my training is in statistics and research methods, and some of the doctors understood stuff, but some of them actually struggle with the most basic statistical things. So my point is this, I think there are researchers and there are practitioners. The practitioners don't need to know, as we say in the South here in America, beans. They don't need to know beans about advanced research methods and analysis. They should know a few basics, and they generally do. Um, but they need to respect and honor and utilize what those nerdy number crunchers produced and, and use it. And that is the current idea in psychology medicine, evidence-based practice, that the evidence is important. So what I do is not, the research that I do is not important for astrologers in terms of, uh, we remove selection bias, we did this, a strict hypothesis test, blah, 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 effect size. I don't think they need to know that, but they need to use this system. They need, okay, you can start throwing tomatoes now, all you out there. They need to drop what they're doing, clutching it like a baby who's holding on so tight, and just open up to the actual data. There's actual data, man. Like, what's your problem? So, okay, they need to use the results of the research. The research itself, I think, is going to be a tiny number of people.
Okay, I'd like to push back a little here if I could.
Oh, good. I
Um,
like that.
yeah. um, when I did the big interview with the critics of astrology that appears in Astrology in the year zero, as you mentioned, um, I found that the quality of the readings I was doing for people at that time plummeted because I'd kind of, although I wasn't persuaded by the critics' arguments, still I was, sincerely engaging with the discussion, and therefore the doubt was more prominent in my mind when I was doing astrology. So, on given that experience and my impressions from talking to astrologers, I think there's a certain native wisdom in astrologers when they want to cling on to the baby, as you put it. In other words, hold on to the methodology that they have become accustomed to. Obviously, that can go too far, and astrologers need flexibility and to open themselves up to new things as well. But up to a point, the fact that confidence is an important factor, I think, means that there is um, there is benefit to astrologers in sticking with what they know.
Wow, that's brilliant. I agree with you actually. That I've had problems in my life, occasionally, and I was going to a conference, astrology conference, like every year, and so on. So it's late at night, you're hanging out with the guys and whatever, and um, I would sometimes get astrological consultations, often kind of informal, with friends. Even though I didn't think their methods actually work, um, like the signal to noise ratio is probably like 1 or 2%. Like it's 98% nonsense and 2% is actually real. But I got tremendous help from those consultations, tremendous help, like really important. And I think what it is that if somebody has a good heart and is open and sensitive, and don't even need to be clearly psychic in terms of seeing auras or whatever, but they're just really interested in me. They're like just, I want to know. And every word I say, they absorb it like somebody who loves music and every little sound, and they take it in. And then even the way they explain it, well, this is in the third house, and I'm thinking, well, that's just baloney. But they came up with the information
Mm.
that was right. And what I've also noticed is that when somebody looks at my chart and they don't know me and they're not listening, what they say about me is just hilariously ridiculous. Like my chart doesn't work. I mean, basically. But if I talk to them, all the stuff they would normally say about Taurus, they don't mention that at all. They pick up on the persistence and the whatever, and certain parts that they can resonate with. And they just automatically drop all the rest. Then if I ask them, why did you not talk about this, they'll say, oh, because the ruler of the dispositor of the whatever. And I'm thinking, you just made that up. But it doesn't matter. It
Mm.
doesn't matter. I think that you could just throw almost any group of symbols at a person in a like a clear paradigm, whether it's Kabbalah or astrology or whatever, it somehow reflects some fundamental archetypal reality. And it's like listening to music. They get into it and whoa, it's really wonderful. So if they lost confidence, getting back to your point, if they lost that connection, it wouldn't work. So, I think we agree there's a lot of complexity here. For me, I used the I Ching when I was in high school, and all that
Mm.
stuff is like, duh. I mean, like everything's a coincidence. I mean, the mystic is obvious to me and the mysterious. What I'm curious about is like looking at a Swiss watch and figuring out how it works. That I don't understand. So, my interest is in does astrology have actual rules at work? I concluded it does, and that fascinates me. So I take back what I said about astrologers needing to follow the data. I think it would be nice if they knew what they were doing because they think they're interpreting the chart and they're not, but it's okay. They helped me, they're helping lots of people.
Yeah, this is so interesting. Um, I mean, I'm thinking now back to when I first started investigating harmonics and found that the fifth harmonic connects a whole load of planets in my chart, which up until that point had just been kind of unaspected. And that actually impacted the way I viewed myself. Um,
Wow.
you, you know, so
Yeah.
I'm I return to the point that we do need to be open-minded and open to um, new new techniques
Yeah.
whilst still holding on to the baby.
Yeah. Yeah. And where I've gone off the deep end for a lot of people is, um, say in the bipolar disorder, we use this basic idea, which Addie used and other people, that if you double a harmonic, the basic meaning doesn't change very much. So 11, 22, 44, 88, 88 times 2 is 176. They work at different levels. The higher vibrations are more granular, like at the level of synapses or something, is what we think. The lower vibes are more behavioral. But what we found with the bipolar disorder, um, it wasn't so much 11 vibe, it was 88 vibe and
Mm,
76 vibe. And that's where we kind of lost people. Is like they said, well, you're fishing around, you're making stuff up. There's no way that could be. Well, but fine. I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything. I'm just trying to figure this out.
mm,
Um, and before David Hamblin passed away, I had mentioned to him and to Christine Skinner that I was changing the name of my astrology from harmonic astrology to vibrational astrology.
mm.
And David Hamblin, he's a wonderful gentleman. I'm sure you know
Oh
him.
yeah.
He's just a fabulous person. Oh my God. And he emailed me back and he said something like, thank God, because people are asking me what the energy function of Venus is and what the 200th vibration means. And he said, I'm very happy. I think it's a great name.
Yeah,
But
good.
yeah, anyway.
Yeah, I knew David a little bit. We were in an astrology group in Bath in the 80s. Um, yeah. So one thing I'd like to ask, I'm not really up to speed with your research, as will have been evident already. Have you? examined the charts where um, the 88 principle doesn't work. So, in other words, you've got somebody with this 88th harmonic strong, and the the sort of template you've developed would suggest that they should be bipolar, but they aren't. Have you looked at
Oh my
those
God,
cases with?
this is a big part of my life. You just hit on is that I've made over 800 YouTube videos, and I made an index into them. And in some of the videos, my master's degree is in research methods, and some are on research methods. And I talk about some research methods that aren't often talked about, but one is about this whole mathematical modeling. And what we do in mathematical modeling is not always statistical. So when Kepler was figuring out the laws of motion, he was saying, okay, well, I've got these great observations of Mars. And he tried this formula. Oh, what's making an ellipse? So let's try this. And how the heck he got 3 times this equals the cube of that? I mean, like, what the heck? The cube of this equals the square of that. And like somehow he found the model, but he called it, as you're probably familiar with this, but a lot of our audience isn't. He humorously called it his war with Mars. Like Mars was not showing up where it should be. Well, I've made videos on individual cases that do not work, that literally I would spend 2 weeks on, 20 to 30 hours a week, 50 to 60 hours on one chart because it doesn't make any sense. And I try this and I try that and go, 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 go. And after a while, I'll find something, and very often it's extraordinarily close to what my original theory was. That's how we ended up going into vibrations in the hundreds. I said, well, if you just go up a few hundred, another few octaves, there it is. And I thought, well, no, it can't be. Why can't it be? Because my ego says it's not possible. I mean, like anything. So, yes, I wrestle a lot, probably more than I should, with individual cases that don't work. I
Hmm,
mean, there might be something going on I don't know about, but and they often vary through a lot of hard effort. They often lead to a new insight, and then we take that insight, put it back add it to the model, and see if it destroys, you know, the model or makes it weaker. But if
hmm.
it improves the previous analysis, then yeah. But I spend a lot of time on that, and there's always cases which a lot of it's subjective. I'm not happy with. Like people will say, "Oh, that's close enough. He did this." The guy's a world champion. That little aspect with that orb is not going to make you a world champion. So I analyze a lot of the greatest athletes, the greatest musicians, because if they don't have something, my there's something wrong with my model.
Yeah.
So it's constantly being adjusted and improved constantly. And that's one of the ways it happens. And a lot of it's personal. I don't know why I get so upset when it doesn't work, but it will literally drive me to near distraction. So, yeah.
Well, I've long thought that that's a very um, neglected approach when one's taking anything near to a scientific view of astrology. One needs to learn from the cases that where something doesn't quite work and see what's what and why it doesn't work and whether the model needs to be modified in some way.
Yeah, that's a lot of what I do. I tend to be hard to convince. I'll err towards it not working than it is working. Like
Mm,
um because I just want to know if it works. I'd rather, have what we call a type 2 error, not discover something, than think I discovered something and I didn't. Type 1. I much prefer type 2 errors over type 1 errors. So, uh, yeah.
So uh, if a scientifically literate astrologer came along and said, you know, I'm happy to test Santino's theory, what would what sort of small bit of the of evidence would you ask them to look at, you know, as a an entree?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, research happens in the real world. It doesn't happen in a perfect, ideal world. And one of the things is data. If you can find more data, like more bipolar disorder data, and it's collected in some kind of reasonable way, there's all kinds of caveats there, but reasonably well doesn't have to be perfect. Collect data, test the ideas, or apply them to some slightly different situation. Um, but yeah, if somebody is not an expert in the theory, but they are scientifically literate and they want to test it, let's find some new data and test the models or new. For example, with the bipolar disorder, we have a formula for what makes a person prone to have bipolar disorder. Um, that formula can also be used to predict when they will have an episode. So if somebody has, I would say a minimum of 30 or 40 cases of when a bipolar disorder episode occurs, maybe it's from the files of a psychologist or something, and what the nature of that episode is, we can test that. We have graphs and we do our correlation coefficients and all this stuff. So we can do that as well. But yeah, just come up with some new data or new perspective, new information that we can test it with.
Great.
Research requires so much time and energy, so collecting the data or organizing it or whatever. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, it would be great to think that somebody might watch this very video and get in touch with you with an offer of doing some testing.
We have a growing community. I'm meeting with the people in the Netherlands next week who are doing research. We have the Cosmobiology Institute, which is coordinating with ESAR, NCGR, the Correlation Magazine, which of course is very important coming out of England. And so we are building a larger community, and the Cosmobiology Institute also has, uh, this is the information about the conference and the website,
Yeah.
cosmobiology.org. Um, it also has a free online meeting on the fourth Friday of each month, and we're getting very good attendance. So this is growing, and um, meeting with you, and I'm going to meet with some other astrologers about, do astrologers think that an evidence-based approach using different levels of modern research methods, whether it's exploratory or qualitative or, hardcore quantitative, like doesn't have to be a strict hypothesis test. That's kind of the gold pinnacle, but gold standard. But I think it's a growing movement, and I'm interested in making it grow because that's how advancement happens. It's not going to happen, by me alone. So,
Of course. Yeah.
yeah. Okay. So, Gary, any last words of wisdom?
Uh, well, as I said near the start, I regard myself as still being well, perhaps I could adopt William Lilly's term, a student of astrology. I'm, you know, somebody who's attempting to learn about it. So I wouldn't want to put myself in the position of telling people this is what astrology is, and this is how you should approach it. Except for the kind of broad church approach that I've advocated of finding what works for the individual. Um, and if, by the way, if anybody wants to um, read 100,000 words of scholarly Western philosophy on this subject. You can find my thesis about astrology and truth on the site cosmocritic.com. And thank you. You've got the cover of the second edition of Astrology in the Year Zero there, which is basically a reprint of the original book with a few corrections and a new introduction from Nick Campion. And also I wrote an afterword for it in which I explain how the book came about, what I was thinking at the time, and how my inquiry has progressed subsequently. And then you've got the website astrozero.co.uk where I post more material sort of bearing on the inquiry in the book in one way or another.
Brilliant. And so, you know, I think one similarity we have is I have my bets. My bets is that the confidence levels are very high. This model's working. But until you replicate a study over and over and over and over again, your confidence levels, it's all about confidence levels. They're still modest. And maybe maybe after I'm long gone, or maybe tomorrow, we'll find out that that was a misguided. So, we're on a quest to figure this out. Garry, it's been wonderful talking to you. I can't tell our people, our audience, people viewing this, how important Garry is. He's modest, but his importance in this understanding of astrology is critical and fundamental. I'm really very appreciative to have this meeting because I'm there with my software tools and my analysis and my and my specific model that I'm working with. And Garry's, in the midst of uh, a broader look at what's going on in the field. So this has been really wonderful. Anything else? Are we good?
We're good, yeah. And just let me say, it's been an absolute pleasure talking with you, Santino.
Okay, Garry. Thank you so much. God bless. Thank you all for watching. Take care.